Hello, my loves. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Destina. This is Spiritual Bougie Astrology, and we're going to do another meditative rant video comparing this week's transits to the full moon eclipse that happened on May 5th of 2023. I said this in the weekly podcast episode that I would do this extra little video to kind of go over some things for some people, because I know whenever I say activation points, sometimes I am talking to brick walls. Y'all are deer in headlights. I can't see you. All I see is a little screen and a camera in front of me, but I know deer in headlights. Energetically, I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like. I get it. So here's the deal. I'm going to do a comparison of some of the quick little transits that are going to happen this week and next week against the full moon eclipse chart that happened from May 5th of 2023. And we're basically hi. Yeah. I haven't had a whole lot of sleep, just FYI. Anyways, I'm basically going to treat that eclipse like it's its own birth chart. We all have a birth chart. Everything in existence has a birth chart. Every event in your life can be casted as a chart that can be paired against an actual natal chart. There are times that whenever I will say in the podcast, like, oh, this is going to be like a really good transit. This is going to be really helpful. It's like really mundane. It's not supposed to be crazy. And then I get a DM going, what the hell? You said it was going to be fine. I'm like, okay, generically, yes, it was supposed to be fine. However, this little transit was like on your natal Pluto. What am I supposed to do about that? That's your chart. The whole idea for the weekly forecast is to give you a general breakdown of how certain energies can play through. But there's a reason I'll say in each one, I'm like, for some people it's going to be negative, for some people it's going to be positive. It's really kind of coming down to your personal karma and your personal chart. So, as opposed to trying to read a bunch of birth charts on the forecast and have permission from a bunch of people to do that, which I'm sure there's one or two people that'd be like, you can totally read my chart that way. No, I don't want to do that. What I would rather do is compare this week over the natal chart and kind of explain some of these activation-like energies, because some people have messaged me going, I don't want to go back to May. It's not necessarily going back to May. We don't get a time machine. Doc Holliday is not in my living room. I do not have a DeLorean. I don't even know that I would want a DeLorean. It's more along the lines of activation points. Think of it this way. Natal placements. We're going to treat this chart like a natal chart anyways. It's the same thing. If you have natal placements in certain degrees and certain signs, which we all do, then there are going to be certain transits that you will feel more than other people. The fixed signs having eclipses going through their houses for the last 2 years, they got extra. They've been feeling the rumbles and the disruption and the craziness and the upheaval and all the other stuff. Mutable signs, y'all are next. But when I say next, I don't mean like next month. Well, I kind of do mean next month because of what's going to happen with all the Sagittarius transits, but that's going to be like a temporary thing. When I'm talking eclipse axis now, that's what I mean by next. Whenever we get through with this 18-month cycle tied to the nodes going through Libra and Aries, y'all are next. Y'all are next. However, right now, we're wrapping up fixed sign shit shows, as well as activating cardinal sign shit shows. Y'all are on deck. Keep practicing your swing. Anyways, every time an outer planet, a planet in general, not just outer planet, anytime a planet goes over a point in your natal chart, you feel it. Now, the way that manifests for certain people is going to be different. Sometimes it's all up here. It's all downloads. It's all visions. It's epiphanies. It's like, I have this great idea. However you word it. Sometimes that great idea is because the moon is going over your natal Mercury. and you suddenly have an idea. Sometimes everybody else is having a really great time, but for some reason you are vibrating, you're mad, you're frustrated. And as soon as somebody says the wrong thing, you go off. And transit-wise, there was absolutely no reason for that. However, if you ever compare that transit to your natal chart, there could have been something going over your natal Saturn or your natal Mars. So we're going to treat the full moon eclipse from May 5th of 2023 like a natal chart and do a comparison of the activations of the actual transits going over that eclipse point. And this will also give some insight as to like some of the things that I go over whenever I do natal chart readings for people. So there's that. Let's look at the chart. This is a much more fun meditative rant video than the last one, just FYI, and it won't be as long. So here's this. Here is the chart. May 5th, 2023, the full moon eclipse in Scorpio that happened at 12:34 p.m. Central Standard Time, because reminder, I'm an Okie, I'm in Oklahoma. This is always on Central Time for me. Now, at the time of this eclipse, the ascendant was in Leo. We don't need the ascendant, but I'm still going to kind of do this comparison like it's a natal chart. So the ascendant was in Leo. Here was the sun at 14 degrees, 58 minutes. Here was Mercury at 8 degrees, 57 minutes. And this is whenever Mercury was retrograde. You guys have heard me talk about how much of a shit show that last eclipse season was. Part of it had to do with Mercury and Venus and the way they were doing their mutual reception. Here is the moon at 14 degrees and 58 minutes of Scorpio. If I add a layer, when I am recording this, it's Halloween, it's spooky season. Happy Samhain. As of this morning, Mercury, transit Mercury, went over this moon. Now, the moon in a natal chart, we're treating this like a natal chart, so I'm going to keep reminding everybody of that. The moon is reflective of connections to matrons and mothers. It's the feminine energy. It also has to do with emotions. The moon can be tied to dreams. Your empathy and the way that you handle things on an emotional level, the way that you have all levels of empathetic processing. There's also a very big indicator of meditation for people that have water moons. Well, in general, the moon can indicate how you can best meditate. I've said before, I'm a Pisces moon. I do really, really well with water, but I also get messages with tied to songs. Now, if you are a fire moon, that sounds laughable. If you are an earth moon, that is definitely laughable. So there are other ways that you can use the moon as a way to understand your own forms of empathy, your own ways to meditate. And the two things that you always want to look at whenever it comes to understanding how to meditate on something is your moon and your Mercury. Why? Because Mercury rules the logical half of your brain and the moon rules your emotional half of the brain. If you are a water moon, but an earth Mercury, I would say you need to do movement and walks around water, and you need to look for the synchronistic patterns that show up. If you keep having the same message pop up in front of you the same way over and over and over again, you see those angel number synchronicity patterns that come through. Those are the things that you need to look for. You're probably not going to get messages through music like I would. I'm an air Mercury with a water moon. So I can, one, understand that the louder the song is getting in my head, the more I need to go research Mercury in an air sign. And I need to go look at the lyrics. I need to pay attention to what this song's theme represents. Transit Mercury went over the eclipse point, the natal moon, this morning. People would have had downloads. There were certain things that were going on in May of this year, and we are returning to the themes tied to that. based off of the moon cycle in general. So Mercury went over that moon. The next one that's going to go over that moon is Mars, but we're not going to go straight to Mars. We're going to add the extra layer of something that I said in the podcast. Now, this is most specific to Wednesday through Friday in regards to what I was describing in the podcast. However, you can kind of see where I'm going at right now. I said there were 3 elements this week that reactivated this eclipse date. 3. One was Mercury going over this moon. The next will be Mars going over this moon. But the other one, which happens in between the two, is this right here. So, during that full moon eclipse that happened May 5th of 2023, we were also going through a Venus-Neptune square. So you can see transit Venus was at 27 degrees, 56 minutes. Here was Neptune at 26 degrees, 51 minutes. The moon going over this area of the sky is reactivating this square between Venus and Neptune. But the other thing that it's also doing is it's reactivating old energy for new ideas, new communication, new order, it's Mercury's earth sign. So new order, new way of doing things, new forms of communication, new forms of transit. And that's because Venus is entering her opposition to Neptune. Now, the one thing that we had last time that was kind of helping Venus was Jupiter. So I'm going to take this back off of the full moon point for just a minute, or I'm going to take this back down to just the full moon for just a minute to explain what I'm talking about. Neptune was in a square to Venus. Simultaneously, though, Jupiter was in a sextile to Venus. Now, Jupiter sextile to Venus, this is meant to be helpful. We had a boost in our energy. We had unexpected support, something that was very, very reassuring. But with Neptune's energy involved, some part of it wasn't real. Some part of it was fake. Some part of it had an ulterior motive. Some of the people that were coming through had ulterior motives. Deception was at play. Now, there's a couple different ways deception was at play back then. Venus was in mutual reception to Mercury. Mercury was going through retrograde during this eclipse season. It made us see the underbelly of certain people. By seeing that, many of us were able to make very instantaneous decisions. The thing is, there was so much of a shit show back then that once the dust settled, we didn't necessarily know who to trust. Neptune. Everything was covered in crap. Everything was covered in dust. Everybody was dirty. Everybody was bruised. Everybody was affected. Everybody was hurt. If you think back to some of the events that was going on late April to early May, you had some level of frustration or tension or something like that that didn't just affect you as an individual. It had affected you and a multitude of people. Multitude? Jupiter. Masses. Jupiter. Okay? Mercury was retrograde. Rethink, revise, redo, recap, revoke. Neptune's energy is some of the people that we revoked our own energy from. They didn't feel like it was fair. Oh, well for them. Some of the people that we allowed in and we trusted at that time based off of the support play from Jupiter, we had one way of seeing them, one way of thinking, one way of framing things. However, little by little over the course of the summer, some of those new energies and new people have shown they should never have been a part of the process either. Just because one person over here did something negative doesn't necessarily mean that this other person is scot-free and clean. Doesn't necessarily mean that this person was worth trusting. And some of us gave trust to people back then that we shouldn't have given trust to. Now, we are coming back this week to energy from this timeline. So if you were mutable signs, you probably had a lot more of that distrust energy that I'm talking about. If you were cardinal signs, you probably were really trying to deal with like the buildup of something, the buildup towards something that wasn't necessarily based off of the other trains that I've mentioned. That was more kind of because Jupiter and Mars was building a square for an entire month. In May, Jupiter and Mars both changed signs. Fixed signs, we really felt this eclipse. You really felt it. For some people, like a Taurus rising, this was an end of a relationship, like the final nail in the coffin type thing, or it was like a last ditch effort that has still not necessarily, it still hadn't necessarily cleared for a while, but there was like a big finality in that energy, even if you didn't necessarily finalize anything in the moment of the eclipse. That doesn't mean you didn't have a finality. Now, think of the themes, think of the events. The events tie into the themes. Go back through your social media, go back through your pictures. If you traveled during that time, where did you go? Parts of you might be like feeling the energy this week of like traveling back somewhere. That would be a super mundane way to deal with this energy. Very mundane. Other people are seeing that somebody else that had said one thing, promised something, they were a part of that mix-up energy before, and you have learned over time, like, they're not trustworthy. You don't need to believe the things that they say. They are re-triggering some of that insecurity from that timeline. And that can very well be a part of the dissolution that comes later this week. That's the stuff that I was referring to in the podcast. A lot of that dissolution energy comes between Venus and Neptune. The moon going through Gemini, going over the place where Venus was back then, there's some element to this week that makes me think there will be similar themes and patterns from that timeline. The people that we started to trust at that time, or who started to trust us, there can be a falling out. There can be a falling away. A mask of some sort can fall away. That's what I kept saying back then. As a mask is starting to fall away, the way that you saw one person, it's not quite the same. However, Mercury is direct. Mercury is not retrograde like it was before. We can have opportunities that sound amazing, just to be clear, that start to come through this week. They sound too good to be true. And if that's the case, you need to be very, very aware that we are going to get into more and more uncharted territory. And once Mercury goes into Sag, I'm going to call that whole timeline, which we will have 2 timelines of Mercury and Sag. Every time I've meditated on this now, I'm calling it messy season. Because we're going to be starting something new, going into uncharted territory, going into a new area of life. But we're not going to know all the ins and outs. We're going to be blind in a lot of ways. Hopeful, boastful, but kind of blind. The things that we're going to be blind to are starting to unveil themselves now. They're starting to come to the surface now. They're starting to make themselves available. Now, not everybody's getting all their availability this week. Some people are going to get some things deeper when we get into November. However, what you're doing is that final round of clearing and making space this week, because we are transitioning and we are turning something around. Many of us, once we get through parts of this week and next week, we feel like we're starting over in some way. We're starting over without this person involved. We're starting over without this connection. We're coming back to some level of ground zero, but with more knowledge, more foresight, more aid, more experience, but with some lessons learned, for lack of a better way to say it. The big portion of the Venus Neptune opposition, something activates when the moon goes through the T-square. And this again is going to happen overnight. Overnight from the 31st, happy Halloween, to the 1st. So November 1st, 2:24 a.m. Here's the moon squaring Venus. By 5-6 a.m., here's the moon squaring Neptune. Whatever comes through in the dreams or anything like that, whatever messages come through, whatever emotional type of communication, whatever downloads, because remember Mercury went over that moon. We had some type of download. We have some type of synchronicity that like solidifies in front of us. There's something that gets said that even though whatever got said, Mercury, whatever it was, wasn't meant to be hurtful or harmful, going over that activation point, it can hurt. It can hit. It can hit the wrong way or it can hit the right way. You can have just this constant confirmation and reaffirmation of, oh, you're doing so good. You're doing so great. I'm so proud of you. It's so wonderful. Just as much as you can hear somebody say, do you even know what you're doing? And it hurts so bad inside. You feel like you're hearing every insult you ever heard as a child all of a sudden hit your head, even though that's not what got said. Depending on where you are at in your alignment, where you are at in your karma, or if you have planets in these areas, the way it hits you can be different. Is it meant to be heavy? No, it's actually meant to be very, very proactive. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be proactive for everyone. It doesn't necessarily mean that the initial energy will feel proactive for everyone. For some people, it's going to feel like a setback. And again, that's because we are making space. We're clearing the way. We're cutting people off, cutting people out for the new thing that's going to come through. The whole last part of this year is a transition period. And I'm telling you now on this one, and I'll tell you this again when I do the month ahead forecast for November. The way we start November versus the way we end November will be two very, very different mental energies. Two very different ends of the perspective, two very, very different ends of the energy pattern. There's a huge amount of internal and external transitions. This eclipse is bringing them through. The eclipse we just had, Saturn turning direct, bringing them through. The rebirth of Mars will bring them through also. So, you got that much new going on. You damn right you're going into uncharted territory. We all are. We're all in this together. Congratulations. Grab a life jacket. Anyways, the next one is Mars. Mars going over a natal moon. Not just this eclipse point, just to be clear. Sexual desires. Desires in general. Desires flare. The want, the needs. This is what I want, whether it is carnal sexual energy or if it is your drive and your ambition. This is what I want. This is what I deserve. This is how I'm going to be. There's an ambition that activates when Mars goes over this moon. There is something that was already presented to us in some small inkling back in May. But it was the smallest inkling. It was letting us know that this is where our purpose is going to be in the next phase, in the next chapter, with where we go next. Not everybody's aware of that. Not everybody's prepared for that. Pluto came into Aquarius, and if you guys have listened to me for a while, I said Pluto going into Aquarius earlier this year was a pinky toe dip. It really was. It was a pinky toe dip, letting the ripples go through so we could see where changes were going to be. We can also push for the wave, the small little wave, to go over paths of enlightenment, your next phase, your next chapter. But not everybody was in alignment yet. Not everybody was where they needed to be. Not everybody was on the right part of the chessboard. I've said these same things before, but I'm recapping them again. Not everybody was on the right form of the chessboard. Some people had the wrong colors on. Some people were standing in the wrong spot. Some people should have been a bishop whenever they were playing as a pawn. Everybody seems to think they're the king or the queen, but really they're not. I'm going to really ruffle some feathers with that one. I'm not saying that you are not a king or a queen in regards to how you feel about yourself, Leo placements, but not every single person out there is the ruler of a kingdom. Not every single person out there is going to be a boss. Not everybody out there is meant to be a boss. We've all had somebody where they got put into a form of management that they should have never friggin' been in. Hello? Same concept. Mars is going to awaken ambition, awaken desire, emotional desire. It can also mean disruption. And if you guys have listened to me for a while, disruption with Mars can either be pivotal disruption or chaotic disruption. It's your choice on how you deal with the bad things. You can either take it in stride or you can take offense to it. Your choice. Disruption is disruption no matter what. Mars is disruptive energy. Mars going over this natal placement can be a pivotal disruption on an emotional level. Some people can have a calling come through, that dream job energy. Like I said before, we're going to have some type of opportunity or some type of blessing, some type of energetic barrier that falls away this week. And that too speaks to being in our calling and our drive and our ambition and our actions. There's satisfaction in that action. There's a disruption. Not everybody has a negative disruption coming through, but there is a disruption this week. Some of that disruptive energy ties back to that last eclipse. Now, Mars going over the moon goes the most exact in the overnight hours from November 2nd to November 3rd. You can see that here. I actually said that in the podcast because right as it starts to go over that point, the moon is in a trine to Mars. And this also coincides with the sun's opposition to Jupiter. November 4th, Saturn turns direct. Venus and Neptune will have its opposition closer to like the midnight time frame. And then next week, the sun will go over that natal moon, that activation point. When the sun is going over that activation point, Venus will have just went through her trine with Pluto. Some people might get a promise of something when the Venus-Neptune opposition happens that requires an outside perspective. It requires some type of feedback, some type of additional understanding from a whole different person. Maybe somebody that has been in similar situations. Maybe it's just somebody that we trust, that they have also been going through turnarounds because Pluto is newly direct. Well, not newly anymore. We're a month in by this point of Pluto being direct. But given the fact that we're going to have all of these in a roughly less than week time span, it's just over a week, October 31st to November 7th. And the last one that occurs when the sun goes over the moon What is Mercury doing? Oh, it's in a trine to Neptune. So we have something comes through, something that gets unveiled, Neptune energy, with the Venus-Neptune opposition, that needs critical understanding, needs to communicate some things below the surface, that needs to work through trauma, work through fear, get outside perspective, outside understanding. And there's going to also need to be whole levels of communication, because Mercury will very shortly go into that trine with Neptune. And remember, Mercury is the host of Venus. So whatever the Venus-Neptune opposition is directly will speak to whatever the Mercury-Neptune trine is. And that's going to be November 7th. So that's a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be. It's a little over 30 minutes right now. So again, stop. Okay. Treating that eclipse point like a birth chart lets us see where we're going to have the similarities. It is similarities and not the exact same thing, because it's not the same planet. I know the moon's not a planet, it's a luminary, but still, it's not the same planet. All of the planets involved are not in the same places. The only one is that are nearly in the same place. Neptune and Uranus, really, they're the ones that are closest. Saturn was 5 degrees. Now Saturn is turning direct at 0. We can kind of count Saturn. Uranus is in Taurus, has been since 2018. Neptune's in Pisces, has been for over a decade. Those two are about the closest in regards to like excitement, or again, having these things unveiled, having these energetic barriers fall away. Some people were going to see the effect of something based off of Neptune's energy, how it affects us, how it's affecting other people. Sometimes with Neptune, there can be a little bit of razzle dazzle. Sometimes with Neptune, there's a little bit of substance. Sometimes with Neptune, there's deception, lies, and fraud. If we're having an issue with that veil can fall away. That shroud can fall away. If we're having an issue with lies and deceptions and fraud, once that comes to light, something has fell away. That energetic barrier that kept you from seeing that lie has fell away. And if you dealt with lies, deception, and fraud and things along these lines back in May, be aware of that, because that can be a part of that pattern that reactivates this week. But it is a reactivation. It is not a full repeat pattern. It's the next layer. It's the next layer. So sometimes whenever we make a cake, we got cake and icing, cake and fruit and nuts. It's the next layer. It's the next round. It's the next part of the story, the next part of the dialogue. It's not going to be exactly the same thing. And a lot of people got really, really concerned messaging me in the last 48 hours going, it's like, I don't want to do it again. I'm like, hold the phone. I said I was going to do a secondary video, and I meant it. This is a secondary video. So again, just a quick little meditative rant, recapping where the placement was of that eclipse from before, and how Mercury going over that placement, how Mars going over that placement, and then the sun later on going over that placement can be seen. The sun is the ego. There's an identity. Whenever the sun hits that last little point, the understanding of what has been unveiled, whether it is good or bad or ugly, it will directly impact people's identity, people's ego, their notoriety, their popularity. It'll affect individuals. And if you have natal placements in this area, you're gonna feel it more. Okay. I love and appreciate every single one of you. Hit me up with questions. Hit me up with concerns. I am working on a new schedule for new clients, so that if there are people that are wanting readings with me or something one-on-one with me or something along those lines, let me know. DM me, email me, or DMs are usually faster and easier, because I'm gonna be honest, I don't always check my email. Most of the time it's spam. So you can message me through WhatsApp, message me through Facebook, message me through Instagram, whichever of those you're more comfortable with. And I'm creating a lineup of how I'm going to do new scheduling for people moving forward. I was waiting purposely for November for this to happen. So there will be opportunities for people that are wanting natal chart readings, or they're wanting to have one-on-one coaching sessions. Some of us were trying to learn astrology, and you guys are trying to learn it on your own. And I'm very proud of you for that. I'm a self-taught person on just about everything that I know. That's a real thing. However, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And if you're taking on all of this information and you don't know what's good and what's not, sometimes you just need somebody to coach, not teach you everything verbatim, because that's going to get on your nerves. It gets on my nerves. I'm a self-taught person with everything. I don't want somebody over my shoulder all the time. But sometimes it's nice to say, hey, can I get your input from you? Have you heard this before? Does this sound legit? Does this sound real? If you go to the Facebook groups, you're going to have 500 people telling you 500 different points of view that have done all the exact same thing. Sometimes you just want a coach. You want somebody that can actually just kind of ping different ideas off of to kind of give direction. That's going to be something that's going to be more available for people moving forward, is having just individual coaching sessions to help them out. Not just the readings and not just the forecasts. So I love and appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the channel. I know we're growing every single day, and I hope having these little extras helps you learn astrology a little bit better. I'll talk to you soon. Subscribe.